You're a Jedi.
Can you keep a secret?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Star Wars Skeleton Crew Episode 1, Episode 2 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs, references. It's meant to be a crossover with The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, like it takes place during the same part of the timeline, and at least some of the characters, like Jude Law's character, will probably cross over with the other Mando characters, Ahsoka, when they start doing the big crossover movies like the Thrawn movie that Dave Filoni is working on. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. We also have Andor Season 2 episodes coming earlier next year, too. As you can see from the first episode, the opening crawl that they do, it's meant to be sort of a pirate-based series, like Goonies inside the Star Wars universe, crossed with something like Treasure Island, but what if the kids came from Treasure Island and they're trying to get back to Treasure Island? That's meant to be the whole twist of their mysterious, legendary planet that's a myth that nobody in the rest of the known galaxy knows about. They think that it disappeared at some point, because maybe there's a cloaking field. We'll talk about that, because there are a couple shots in the nighttime sky with what looks like a quote-unquote barrier around the planet. There's also a lot of ominous talk about a great work that the entire planet's workforce is dedicated to, which sounds very much like a Star Killer kind of situation. Like, what great works are there in the Star Wars universe after the Empire's fall? Really, the biggest thing that we know about in the Star Wars universe after that winds up becoming the Star Killer base. But we will dig into that and what's going on with Jude Law's mysterious pirate Jedi. It does seem like he's a Force-sensitive person who was a Jedi Padawan, then at some point survived Order 66 and just became a pirate over time. The title of Episode 1 was "This Could Be a Real Adventure," a reference to something that they actually say during the episode because they're so desperate for adventure, living on what they think is the most boring planet, the most boring existence you could possibly have. But in the opening title scene where they show all the different droids and the different helmets, they change a couple because they do that for each of the Star Wars series based on some of the characters that appear during the series. It starts with R2, Jude Law's pirate helmet, RX-33, Rex from Star Tours, who's driving the bus during the episode, C-3PO, Darth Vader. This one actually looks like young Anakin Skywalker when he was pod racing, then the security droids, and then the Mandalorian's helmet, and then SM-33. Who's also voiced by Nick Frost. You might be able to detect his voice. There are a couple voices that are a little more identifiable, like there are a couple big cameos. There was even a Sam Witwer stealth cameo during the episode that I'll point out when we get to that part. Sam Witwer showing up on like every single Star Wars series, but in the most stealth way imaginable. They start the episode with the opening text explainer like they've done before a couple of series like the Ahsoka series or the other Acolyte series, just to explain the vibe of the series in general, when it takes place, where it takes place, and what's going on. Generally being that in the fall of the Empire, piracy has become a much bigger problem in the hyperspace lanes in the outer parts of the galaxy. Really good examples of that we've seen in The Mandalorian were Gorian Shard's pirate crew. Vane actually shows up during this series, so there is a bit of a crossover with The Mandalorian Season 3. In the Shadow Council is the other example that some of the different factions of the Shadow Council were using the hyperspace lanes to raid New Republic cruisers and steal their supplies and weapons. But the whole series is meant to be more pirate-themed than other Star Wars series that we've ever seen before. The camera then pans down, which is a very Star Wars kind of move to make at the beginning of episodes, down to a New Republic ship being boarded by the same pirate group that wind up chasing the kids later in the series. This winds up being Jude Law's crew who mutiny against him at the end of the intro to the episode here. Their scene boarding the smaller ship is meant to give you vibes of Darth Vader boarding Princess Leia's ship during the opening scene of A New Hope. There are also a couple other scenes that they have that mirror shots in conversations that they have at the beginning of A New Hope as well too. Michael Giacchino is doing the music for the series. He made a couple pirate themes, like there's one playing here, there's one at the end of episodes. They play them throughout the different episodes. Then we meet Jude Law's pirate character. He's meant to be the captain of this particular crew at this before they mutiny, and they're calling him Captain Silva, which is meant to be a reference to Long John Silver from Treasure Island, because it's like the kids are from Treasure Island, or if you want to make the space reference, Treasure Planet, which is also an old Disney movie. Now, it wasn't a great movie. I think the original Treasure Island is a little bit better. But that's part of the whole joke of the series, is like, what if the kids were from a secret treasure planet and they didn't know that they were from Treasure Planet? Like, what? Our planet has eternal treasure. What's going on there? Just the way they're hyping that up so much, especially in the second episode, makes me feel like it's going to be a misdirect, and the eternal treasure that the legends speak of for their At-Aden planet will wind up being something else besides like actual monetary treasure. Like, what if the real treasure were the friends we made all along the way, kind of thing. But when they introduced Jude Law's character as Captain Silvo, the actual news releases that they were doing about his series called him Jod Na Na Wood, so that might just be the name that he gives the little kids, and Silvo might be the fake pirate name that he creates for himself when he goes on the run trying to escape Order 66. Generally speaking, though, based on his age, it seems like he's about the same age as the Mandalorian, and you remember the Mandalorian during the Clone Wars was a little kid, so he'd be around that age, like he would have been a Padawan around the time Order 66 is happening, not a full Jedi yet. Which would also explain why he's stuck in the prison cell at the end of Episode 2, because his Jedi abilities aren't that powerful. Generally, I think just from the vibe of the character and the way they've been pitching him on the series, all the interviews that Jude Law has been doing, they want to make it feel a little bit like what if Han Solo were Force sensitive, but he were still a bit of a scoundrel. If you have not seen any of the Treasure Island movies, there have been many of them over the years. Long John Silver basically pulls a con on young Jim Hawkins trying to tag along and find a mythical treasure, then steal it out from under his nose. So basically the pitch of the series here is that Jude Law senses that these kids might be really gullible and they're from this mythical treasure planet that he wants to find so he can claim the treasure for himself. You notice there's a cameo scene from Jaleel White, who's one of his pirate crew members, Steve Urkel in space. Jude Law's speech here to the captain is meant to be a comp to Darth Vader's speech to Princess Leia at the beginning of A New Hope 2.
This is a bulk freighter.
If this is a bulk freighter, why is your vault magnetically sealed?
If this is a consular ship, where is the ambassador?
Notice in the background that you see Vane from Gorian Shard's crew has joined Jude Law's crew, so this is meant to take place like right after the events of The Mandalorian Season 3, because at the end of Season 3, Vane bails on Gorian Shard and is the lone survivor of his pirate crew. The way they explain that is that John Watts, the creator of the series, who did all the Spider-Man movies in the MCU so far, like Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home, they were watching The Mandalorian Season 3 and they liked the Vane character so much that they asked Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni not to kill him off, to leave him alive so that they would be able to use him on this pirate show. In the way that John Watts explains the origin of this series is he actually said way back in around 2017, 2018, he pitched the story to Lucasfilm as a movie, but because Spider-Man Homecoming did so well, made so much money, they wanted to do a sequel as fast as possible, so he had to do Spider-Man Far From Home instead of doing that movie, and this wound up turning into a TV series because Disney Plus was created a couple years after that. When they were filming Spider-Man Far From Home more recently, because Jon Favreau also plays Happy Hogan inside the MCU, he was talking to John Watts while they were filming that and talked to him about actually doing a Star Wars TV series, which is then how it finally made it to TV. And because it's meant to be a spin-off of The Mandalorian and Ahsoka and crossing over with those other shows, that's why Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are executive producers on the show. But the way they've talked about the series is that it was meant to be a one-off. They didn't plan for it to have multiple seasons, and because the kids age up so quickly, the kids will be way bigger by the time they would be able to shoot a season 2. If they do a season 2, it'll mostly be for Jude Law's character. But then they pay off the mutiny with them finding that there is no actual treasure on the ship, just a single credit, sort of setting up the credits twist in the later episode 2, where they find out the kids are from this mysterious treasure planet. The alien that betrays Silvo at the beginning here is named Brutus, and it's meant to be a reference to Brutus's betrayal of Caesar, like the tragedy of Caesar. Then it jumps to their home planet at Aden to Wim, who's this huge Jedi and Sith fanboy playing with his own action figures. That's right, there is Jedi and Sith merch inside the Star Wars universe. It looks kind of like they're homemade too, like some people on the planet made them for him. They don't really get too deep into this, they're not specifically about Obi-Wan Kenobi or Luke Skywalker or even Darth Vader, there's very generic Sith and generic Jedi figures. We meet his father, we learn a little bit about his life at home here, the neighborhood that he lives in. It seems very suburban. It's meant to feel very Spielbergian, they said, like a classic Amblin film, kind of like the E.T. movie, where you have bands of roving kids running around having adventures all over the place by themselves without adult supervision. He goes down to eat breakfast. He has his own version of blue milk, but instead of being blue, it's kind of greenish. We find out that his mother died at some point. We don't really know the circumstances behind that. Maybe they'll explore that in some future episode. But once you travel outside and you see the actual suburbs of it all, like classic American suburbs, it's almost weird. It's so perfect looking, so calm and peaceful looking that it seems kind of creepy and sinister. This gets into all the talk they have of the quote-unquote great work, so don't worry, we will get to that in a second. He runs past a random Ithorian woman that's just walking her pet and into his best friend Neil. They continue to play the Jedi vs. Sith game. I love the way the other kids too think it's super lame, like what the hell are you doing? When he cuts his arm off, that's meant to be a comp to Darth Vader cutting Luke's hand off during Empire Strikes Back. But the way they explain the kids, they generally have zero knowledge of what happens outside their planet in the galaxy, so I'm assuming that they don't know what happened between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. They just know that the Jedi Order existed, that there were Sith at some point, like just generic legends. Generally, it seems like their planet is shielded from a lot of the rest of the goings-on from the rest of the galaxy. The way they talk about it too, it sounds like at some point they erected some sort of barrier and it disappeared off of maps, so people are like, no, that's not a real planet. Eventually it just fell into myth. Also, they could complete some dark, secret, great work task, which sounds extremely sinister. The way they explain his best friend Neil here, he's not meant to be an Ortolan like Max Rebo. He's not from the same race, but this is what Neil's parents look like. They don't look exactly like Max Rebo, but they haven't said what their race is. We see that an R3X droid, also known as Rex from Star Tours, is driving the bus. He was voiced by Pee Wee Herman in the original version. There are a bunch of Easter eggs like this throughout all the episodes. This Jedi hero that Wim is reading in the text says his name is Druin, but I can't find any references to him in the canon. It sounds like he's a brand new Jedi character from the lore. They clock Fern and KB, who drive past on her speeder bike to school. She's meant to be more the Han Solo of the group, more of a rogue, more of a leader character, a little bit quicker on her feet when it comes to thinking about stuff. KB is meant to be the smart one. They didn't explain exactly what her visor is for, other than just giving her enhanced sight, but she's not meant to be blind. It does look a little bit like Geordi LaForge's visor, though. We go to the inner city when they're going to school. It seems like a totally normal mid-sized city, way less overpopulated or industrial looking like Coruscant. Like this is the most idyllic place you could possibly live. Inside their class, their instructor droid seems like they're using a similar type of display readout as the ones from the original trilogy. Like this is where this technology comes from. And now this is actually the second time that we've seen a class full of children inside the Star Wars universe. The first time was with Grogu during The Mandalorian Season 2. Wim gets caught drawing a Jedi on his desk. The way he uses the controls too with those dials makes it seem like a really advanced Etch-a-Sketch. This is Kerry Condon, who most of you might remember as the voice of Iron Man's second AI, Friday, in all the Marvel movies.
Friday.
Sokovia's going for a ride.
On the series, her name is Undersecretary Farah, and she's meant to be Fern's mother. Notice she's also wearing a space cape. Krennic and Moff Gideon would be proud, keeping the tradition of the space cape alive and well in the Star Wars universe. They introduced the concept of career placement tests, which are actually common in all countries around the world in real life. Like everybody's had to take a version of that at some point, but part of the idea is they're trying to rush all the little kids to decide their entire life's path as they're like 12 years old here. Like they seem very young. With the idea that most of the main character kids just want to have some fun in adventure because they are little kids. The kids feeling like they're stuck on the planet, desperate for some adventure, trying to get off-world, also feels a lot like Luke Skywalker on Tatooine. They start talking about the idea of the great work, but here's the thing, I think they don't tell you exactly what it is for a reason. Like they make it sound like it's this grand thing and they're trying to indoctrinate these kids in a really sinister kind of way, so that there's some big twist later on where we might find out that the great work winds up being some huge super weapon project that they're working on, and that's why the planet is cloaked from view. And that might be what the barrier is that they mentioned later, like the kids have traveled past the barrier when they get lost. Maybe it's actually a cloaking device or some sort of shield that prevents the rest of the galaxy from knowing what's going on there or passing through it. If you look at the background of some of their houses too, like the mural here, this might have something to do with that great work. This person even looks a little bit like Princess Leia, but I don't know if that's the comp they're making, but the shining thing that she's holding up is the symbol that they wear on all their patches. That is probably the great work that they're referring to. But it all just feels so very sus, them trying to indoctrinate these little kids into this project that's called The Great Work. Let me know in the comments, what do you think The Great Work actually is? Like I said earlier, the biggest super weapon project after the fall of the Empire in this part of the timeline would be like early era Starkiller base. Kerry Condon also says the Great Work has something to do with keeping the Republic peaceful and strong. That could also be a misdirect too. They set up the twist with KB and Fern's bike needing the new power converter, which is also a reference to Luke Skywalker at the beginning of A New Hope. Remember, at the beginning of that movie, he was going to Tashi Station to get a couple of new, quote-unquote, power converters.
Gotta get a new power converter.
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
We find out she's part of some underground speeder bike racing group in the area. Also, the speeder bike racing in general feels like a pod racing callback too. There are a couple of Phantom Menace Easter eggs during this as well. When Wim goes to sleep reading more Jedi stories and they pan up to the night sky, you get a look at those stations in the air, which seem like the barrier they reference later. Like, maybe it's a cloaking shield, maybe it's just simple weather stations, but it just seems like it's something that's preventing the rest of the galaxy from being able to detect that the planet exists. When he winds up sleeping through his alarm and missing the bus, it felt very Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 1, not running fast enough the first time. All to set up his little shortcut in finding the buried ship, setting up the whole plot of the series. These little streamers on his bike bars made this feel very much like a little kid's bicycle in real life too. Like only a little kid would put streamers on his handles like this. The whole race through the woods also felt very much like the speeder bike chase on Endor. He crashes, then finds the ship, and the voice of the security droid sounds similar to EV-99's voice, but this also might have been a stealth Sam Witwer cameo scene, voicing the actual droids. Just because in the credits you actually see Sam Witwer under additional voices, meaning that he did some of the background voices, which usually winds up meaning that they did some voices for aliens that they don't actually credit as characters in the episode, just like background droids or aliens at some point through the episodes. Between this and his on-screen cameo scenes, Sam Witwer has almost been in every single Star Wars series, but not quite in the way people want. Like, people are actually hoping to see his face on screen at some point, like play a version of Starkiller in a Star Wars series, or play a version of the Sun. Maybe we'll see some references to that during Ahsoka Season 2. But it is kind of weird that Sam Witwer has been in every single Star Wars series, but you've never actually seen his face as Sam Witwer in those series. Love the way that he gets in super big trouble after he's rescued by the droid, but while he's waiting to be yelled at, he's still reading stories about the Jedi. I can't quite make out the text just because it's a little too small, but if you can read Arabesh, the main language of the Star Wars universe, and you can make out this tiny print, let me know what you think his datapad says. I think this is meant to foreshadow the treasure they wind up finding, like the idea that he thinks the ship is the Jedi Temple, and he's looking at the Jedi Temple on the datapad here. But in all the trailers, they do actually wind up finding some pirate treasure, like a room full of treasure, One-Eyed Willy style, to make more Goonies references. So at least at some point in the series, they do wind up finding treasure, even if the planet of eternal treasure at Adam that they're from doesn't contain actual physical treasure. Fern shows up also in trouble, and they bring back the wizard saying from Phantom Menace, one of the other Phantom Menace references in the episode. Wizard is like a Star Wars slang for cool.
This is so wizard, Annie.
You might recognize this crazy holographic circus that Neil's younger brothers are watching is taken directly from the Star Wars Holiday Special. It's the exact same recording that Chewbacca's son is watching on Life Day. He winds up giving them the Jedi 1 and Jedi 2 comm signals. All this Jedi fanboying is just to set up the idea that Jude Law is going to take advantage of that to try and Long John Silver them, Long Con style, to find the treasure that he thinks that they have access to. They had that funny scene with Fern and KB clowning on them in the whole claimsies idea. It felt very little kid, like little kids would definitely have an argument like this. Like, well, her logic is sound. She did call claimsies. She did win that fair and square. Just like trying to call riding shotgun in the car. Her funny lie about the green poison gas and eating each other is just a zombie joke in the Star Wars universe, which does remind you a little bit of the zombie stormtroopers reanimated by the Nightsisters during Ahsoka. They didn't use green gas to do that, but the magic that the Nightsisters use is colored green. KB uses her visor to open the door. They start exploring and find SM-33, which is meant to be a reference to Smee from Peter Pan. Also, bit of a connection here too. Jude Law played a version of Captain Hook in a more recent production of Peter Pan. So there's just a big intersection of a lot of pirate-based, Disney-based lore on this series. When Wim says some Jedi temples could lower themselves in time of danger, that's a reference to the Jedi Temple on Lothal during Star Wars Rebels. KB activates the ship's power source, taking it out of hibernation mode by banging on it a couple of times. They learn the cockpit is rotated here like the chairs are on the ceiling, but it basically starts powering itself on and accidentally takes off without them realizing. Love the way they set this up too, like there's a green flashing button that he just feels compelled to push. Like anytime a little kid sees a flashing button, does not matter what the button does, that button will get pressed. Which they pay off later with the self-destruct button, which they also worry that he's going to try and press. Like, please, whatever you do not press that button. So it feels like the self-destruct button is now going to be Chekhov's button. Like, the minute that a little kid is told not to press a button, of course he's going to press that button at some point. So maybe by the end of the series, he will have pressed that button. I believe the actual ship's name is meant to be the Onyx Cinder, but you don't learn too much about the actual history of the ship yet. I think the idea is that it's all in SM-33's databanks, but they just haven't found a way to access that yet. Like, they haven't asked him the right series of questions to unlock that information yet. But essentially, it used to be a pirate ship, so he used to serve a pirate captain. There are a couple skeletons that they find on the ship, but it's not clear if one of them was the captain or if they were just random crew members. But either way, they died in a fight with each other. And they basically end episode 1 with them jumping into hyperspace. Part of the reason why they jump into hyperspace is because they put the ship on autopilot, so the autopilot was taking them to the ship's home when they eventually take it out of hyperspace in episode 2. So like if they hadn't taken it out of hyperspace, the ship would have just taken them to wherever the ship originally came from. Episode 2 was titled Way, Way Out Past the Barrier. It's a reference to Neil's quote later in the episode saying that they traveled past the barrier around their planet. Like I said, in the night sky, all these installations seems kind of like some sort of force field or a cloaking device of some sort. Not totally clear which part of space their planet is in, but it might be inside the unknown regions too, because when they were pitching the series a couple of years ago, they made it sound like it was going to take place in an unknown part of space, and when people say that in the Star Wars canon, they're usually talking about the unknown regions. SM-33 activates. They have that funny scene of Fern calling claimsies on being pirate captain, with SM-33 assuming that she's the new captain after she lies, saying that she killed the previous captain. Well, apparently the logic is that it's meant to be another follow-up on the claimsies joke from episode 1. When he walks in, he also calls the little kids gremlins, which feels like a Grogu joke, but you could also say this also makes gremlins canon to Star Wars now. There's a bit of a joke about SM-33 speed running how to operate all the different ship systems, like many different systems, super complicated, but KB instantly absorbs all the information. None of the other little kids seem like they understood what he said though. Then he winds up taking them to that pirate starport, the kids not realizing it's a pirate hideout until they arrive because they don't realize this is a pirate ship. They set up the whole idea that the droid has no idea where their planet is and starts rifling through a bunch of different planets in the Star Wars universe. When he says Adalon, that's a planet near Lothal where the Bendu lived during Star Wars Rebels. I love the idea that he almost took them to see the Bendu. Wim would have loved that, being a Jedi fanboy, but I think the idea during Rebels is the Bendu transitioned to becoming a Force ghost. Al-Alcor isn't a planet from Star Wars, they just invented it for the episode. Aldhani, you'll remember, was where Cassian Andor and the other rebels did their big raid during Andor Season 1. But the whole idea is they have no idea how to get home because as little kids, they have no idea how to navigate, and they don't really know anything about the rest of the galaxy either. Wim winds up using the wizard phrase again when he finds the captain's quarters. Notice he puts on what looks like a classic pirate hat from ancient Earth. There's also a lot of pirate trappings here too, like there's a compass, there's a spyglass, things that you would normally expect in like a 1700s era pirate TV show. Just the way he holds the compass too makes it feel like it's going to become important in the future, like keep an eye on that compass. When they arrive at the pirate base, there's a whole bunch of ships in the background, but zoom and enhance, in the background, you actually see what looks like Hondo's ship. So this is like the closest we've gotten to actually seeing Hondo on one of the live-action Star Wars series. Borgo is also a big Star Wars Legends pull. It was originally tied to the ancient Rakatan Empire, which they also brought back into official canon recently, in the Hydian Way, which is also just one of Star Wars' major hyperspace lanes. The ferryman here is also a super deep cut some of you might recognize as a Teak who's featured during the Ewok movies, the made-for-TV movies, Battle for Endor and Caravan of Courage, so really deep pull there. This whole scene is meant to feel a little bit like A New Hope when Obi-Wan is telling Luke about Mos Eisley, "You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy," and true enough, it's basically a pirate base, so it's like the worst possible place you could go to if you're a little kid. Love how Wim almost inadvertently walks into the brothel, but Fern has to tell him no because he's such a sweet summer child, like he has absolutely no idea. KB sees the alien in the cage from the Captain EO video, meaning that Michael Jackson is also canon to Star Wars now. It winds up escaping in the chaos later, it and like one of the other members of its race, so they're alive and well living in the pirate base somewhere else. Then the boys go to get some space ramen, and they have their own version of a Mos Eisley Cantina fight scene where things go absolutely crazy. The way the bartender talks about this, he calls them Old Republic credits. Now, I'm not clear if he's talking about the actual Old Republic as in Knights of the Old Republic tens of thousands of years ago, or he's talking about the Republic from the old days before the rise of the Empire, which is less than 100 years old. But either way, the credits that he has are worth way more than anything that anybody on the station has, so they try to bilk them out of them and steal them from him, and Vane shows up too, and things get real crazy. They reveal that this pirate base is actually currently controlled by Jude Law's former crew, which call it their base. Then when the woman from the brothel tries to save the girl, she says that they're Linderlings from the lost planet of Eternal Treasure. Like I said, Eternal Treasure can mean a lot of things. It might not be actual physical treasure. But I couldn't find any example of Linderlings being a term from previous Star Wars canon, so it just feels like a new thing they completely invented for the series. They're saved by SM-33, who absolutely wrecks all the pirates until Jude Law's former crew throws them in the cells, also revealing that they threw Jude Law in the cells after they mutinied. The kids trying to train the rat to fetch the key is also a Pirates of the Caribbean reference. In the way he introduces himself, it sounds like he kind of waited to listen to them talk and just senses their gullibility and is trying to use them as a way to actually escape the base. Pretty much everybody will recognize the music that plays when Jude Law force pulls the keys. It's Binary Sunset, which they've used so many times through all the Star Wars movies and TV series. It's one of the most famous Star Wars themes. And like I said, the way he's playing up it with this theatricality here is that he wants to present himself like he is a Jedi who's going to help them, when really he's more of a Long John Silver kind of character, and they're the young Jim Hawkins in this scenario where he's just tricking them so that he has an opportunity to both escape and then steal the treasure that he thinks that they have access to. My early theory for his character arc is that he will ultimately still be a scoundrel, like still more of a Han Solo type of figure, but he will ultimately try to save their lives from his former pirate crew. If you want to make a Goonies comp, his former pirate crew would be kind of like the Fratellis, chasing them down as they eventually find One-Eyed Willie's treasure. But there are a bunch of Easter eggs and references throughout the episode, so if there's any that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. In my episode 3 video, we'll post next Wednesday. Remember, it's going to be a Tuesday show from now on. I don't know why they aired episode 1 and 2 a day early, but for whatever reason, next week it'll be a Tuesday show. There's a bunch of other stuff coming up in the Star Wars universe. I've already done an Andor Season 2 trailer video. Click here for that, and click here to learn about Henry Cavill coming to the Star Wars universe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.